Hola guys, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'd be ranting about the computer we'd be building, my brother-in-law and I, a budget gaming computer for his son, a 5-year-old. And yeah, and I'd like to share some of the considerations we made in regards to building it. This is actually a second take of mine. Earlier, it was really long and kind of boring. Not that this video will be fun. I hope it will be. Anyway, here are some notes. Let me minimize my face here. Smacked in the middle. All right. There are some notes that I made. Feel free to. Those are just some highlights of the key points. All right. And yeah, let's start off with this one here with the list that we've made. This is actually what we've bought already. And let's start with the memory. What's optimal right now, up until now for gaming, that is 16 gigabytes operating in dual channel. All right. What he bought here is two sticks of 4 gigabytes with a low timing of 66 megahertz. Reason for that is I already have a spare two sticks of 4, and he already knows that the 16 gigabytes will be enough for their use case, so that's fine. So the motherboard that we chose needs to have 4 DIMM slots as well, right? So be careful on your motherboard options. More on that later on. For those of you who'd be buying a higher timed memory, normally we'd be buying them in pairs, right? Like for example, this one here, 3200 megahertz memory. In my experience, 3200 megahertz paired memory runs fairly well if you add two more of the same kind. So no problem there. You'd start having problems if the one module has dual ranks and the speed is a bit higher. You may have some stability issues there. To keep it short, guys, the note here on the left side of the screen, if you're considering to add more modules in the future, two sticks of single rank memories operating in dual channel, 3200 mega transfers per second should be fine for for future situations where you decide on adding two more of the same kind. All right. But if you're already set and you already know that two sticks of modules are enough, is all that you need, just buy a paired one, maybe two sticks of 16 gigabyte RAMs will do the will do the job. Just buy a pair of that and you'd be all set. Like say you buy a 4000 megahertz or mega transfers per second module, and you decide you'd only need that particular pair, no problem. You'd have a problem in the future if you do decide, and if you ran out of memory capacity and you cannot just simply add two more of those or a pair more, you might encounter stability issues. Where to resolve that, you'd have to lower the speed a bit or tweak the timings, tighten the timings up for that new speed, So it's not as easy as installing lower speed modules. In my experience, 3200 megahertz is pretty constant in regards to stability. 3600 megahertz mega transfers per second is somewhat fine. Uh, Sometimes XMP profiles doesn't always work with 3600 megahertz mega transfers per second modules, but if you apply them manually, if you disable the XMP and assign the timings, assign the speed manually, they most of the time work as well. But higher than that, you may have stability issues where you'd have to actually lower the speed and adjust the timings for it to run stably. All right. So that's it for the memory. And next one's storage. NVMe 500 gigabytes. And if we'd open this one here. All right, so for example, you're actually trying to go for a really budget build where you select a very cheap SSD, which is 1550, 1550 pesos, and stay with this. Only this one here doesn't really, it won't really be a good idea because this is a really small capacity, all right? You'd have to have at the very least a hard drive installed into your system. And you add in a 1 terabyte hard drive, uh, at the very least 7200 RPM. 5400 RPM is really slow. You'd really notice the slowness of it. So try to keep away from that one if you'd be using it for gaming. And right now, our running balance is 3,789 pesos. Now, if you just add in a few more, all right, so here you go. If you just add in a few more, 300, 800 pesos more, you could simply just get a 1 terabyte SSD and call it a day. It'll be a lot easier, guys. You won't have to plan your volume usage, stuff like that. One storage for all of them, done. But if you decide to make it like this, you're just making it hard for yourself. All right. But what we decided on doing was, because my brother-in-law had his old laptop on an SSD, it has an SSD inside that. We'd actually reuse that SSD and use it together with a 500 gigabyte SSD, this one here. So we're able to save a bit of money there. So I will remove this one for clarity. There you go. So, to sum it up for in regards to storage, if you're getting a 256 SSD, 1 terabyte hard drive, it may be a good idea to just get a 1 terabyte SSD right away. And I cannot avoid sharing this. I'm really having good experience in regards in regards to storage caching. We have Intel Optane, Primo Cache, AMD Store MI. They're really good in my opinion. Well, not really AMD Store MI. I haven't tried that one out still. But in regards to Primo Cache, it's really effective, guys. And just try and imagine, there in the note there, 1 terabyte of SSD. You partition that, save 700 gigabytes for local storage, 200 250 gigabytes for caching of your hard disk drive, whether it's a 1 terabyte or a 2 terabyte drive, and another 50 gigabytes for over provisioning. You're all set. You will really notice its performance increase, especially after a while. All right. As you know, caching is not really that simple where it works magic, but you'd really notice its performance improvement especially after a while. So try looking into that, Primo Cache or Intel Optane. All right. Yeah. So far what we have done was the memory and this one here and the storage. Next one is the case. In regards to case, originally what we were planning on buying was this G Storm here for 600 pesos. But what we ended up buying was this one here, TechWare Nexus Air M2, 1600 pesos. Basically, guys, in regards to computer case, airflow. That's all there is to it. What you have to be careful of or consider is, this one is for later, our airflow design, or rather, how the air flows inside your case, considering your graphics card design. What I mean is, the video card, the video card that I have here is, all right. If you take a look at this picture here of the 6600 XT dual radian from Asus, the fins are on a horizontal pattern where it will really benefit for a positive type of airflow that's inside the case. Meaning the intake air is greater, a lot greater than what's being exhausted, all right, by the exhaust fans, all right? So that will actually help divert the air out through the PCIe port, something like that. But if your card is similar to this one here, where the fins are vertical in pattern, it'll be a good idea if you have a negative type of airflow or some type of airflow that directs it, depending on the orientation of your graphics card, if it's vertical or horizontal as well, all right? Uh, that the air is pushed up and away from the video card that's within the case, all right? So, for example, this card here, the air flows here and comes out at the top side of the video card, right? So, for example, the card is here, the intake fans of the video card is here. So, it will blow it into the card and out on the upper part, right? Or side part, depending on how you look at it. Uh, Getting out on this part of the video card. So what you'd want to happen is you'd want to direct that airflow up and away, up and away from the air intake of the video card. All right. So air goes into this one here, part of the video card, out here, and this airflow here should be directed upwards or away towards the intake fans of the video card. What you'd have to be careful on these type of fans is, or these type of video cards is, you may have an intake fans directed towards the video card, the back side of the video card. You'd wanna avoid that because the back portion of this video card here is it exhausts hot air out of that back side of it, right? But if there's air pushing towards it, you're keeping the air on a standstill, you're stalling the air, and it'll amount to a poor airflow. So people who'd be buying Lian Li Lian Li 011 dynamic cases would really have to consider their fan positioning, where they'd really have to position the air upwards. Now, for Lian Li 011 similar types of cases where the video card is installed vertically, you'd have to be careful of the side fans where it doesn't blow towards the card. Otherwise, you may compromise the temperature because of the back side of the GPU where the hot air, instead of going out, is being pushed back in because of the case fan of Lian Li 011 dynamic, similar type of face or fan configuration, all right? And that's all there is in regards to cases. Oh yeah, motherboard size. Make sure the motherboard will fit into this one. The graphics card length will is supported by this one. What I like with this case here, it does seem like you're able to mount the fans outside of the case. So the graphics card length is very there's a pretty good allowance there. Yeah, 300 millimeter for the GPU card clearance and quite a good cooler height clearance as well. That's why I really like this case right there. And other than that, yeah, basically it's just airflow, guys. And airflow and clearances. Clearances. In regards to clearances, make sure other components. Make sure in regards to clearances, make sure other components are actually considered as well. Like for example, I've mentioned here, it does say here 300 millimeter maximum GPU card length, right? But it did not specify if what if there's a fan installed inside. Will the 300 millimeter graphics card still fit? Those kind of things. You'd really have to consider that. All right. And yeah, the type of cooler you'd be installing, but this will be a budget build computer. So the free air cooler should actually be enough to cool the i3 that we'd be buying. All right. So that's the case there. Next one is the power supply. In regards to power supply, you don't really want to cheap out on the power supply. My style is I try to search for a fairly priced power supply unit and get its model number. I copy that one. I copy that one. It's actually already here, but I'll type it again. I paste that in there, adding in Tom's Hardware. I find Tom's Hardware reviews in power supply is really good, really accurate, very detailed. You could visit their website and search for the power supply and use their website for reference. And this one here has actually very good review considering its price point. Now, I like it how he worded it here in his review. You can never have too much performance. That's very true. In our case, though, 500 watts is really enough. We're not expecting RTX 3080 here with an i7, i9 CPU. This will only operate at the very most an i5 12400 and at the very most a 3070, which should give us about 400 watts of load usage, but that alone is pretty high. What we'd want to keep our load somewhere in the 80%. 80% is actually quite too close for comfort already. What I mean is the fan of your PSU may be running at all times and it'll get pretty warm. It'll operate just fine, no problem. These, especially the recent power supply units, should operate quite fine, but it'll operate warmly and noisily. You may want to consider that one because if the fan breaks, you'd have to, jerry rig that thing, try to fix it, troubleshoot it, which won't really be a good idea unless you're a professional. Yeah. So to save the lifespan of a power supply unit, you don't really want to operate at 100% load at all times. Although for this particular power supply unit, it is tested with 100% load and it was able to deliver. And in our use case, if we do decide to put a 3070 in this power supply with an i3, that should result to 400 watts, 300 watts with an i5. It should still be fine since the person who'd be using this one is a 5-year-old. At the very most, he'd only be using this power supply for an hour, a couple of hours a day. So, which shouldn't really be a problem for this power supply. All right. And going back, power supply. And next one here is the video card. In regards to video card, my brother-in-law is actually putting this off until December or come next year. But in regards to video card, whatever budget you have there with you, just buy the best one. And your monitor will actually have a lot of influence to it, depending on the resolution. In regards to monitor, guys, I'll just focus on resolution, all right? Way back, when I didn't really mind what monitor I'd be using, all I'd consider is the size. But now, in regards to gaming or watching, resolution will really give that very nice quality in regards to gaming. All right, so that's all there is to it. Consider resolution, but do take note. We have lots of software like one from Radeon, AMD, Nvidia, DLSS, FSR, those kind of things. Scaling where you're using a 4K monitor, but it's being upscaled from a 1080p. So you're able to get 1080p performance while being given the output for a 4K. For some people, that's fine. For some people, it's not. For me personally, 6600 XT, I'm upscaling it to a 4K 1440. It's just fine. But once you get the taste of a higher performance video card, your taste may vary. So uh, basically r- our scent our taste is really dependent on our budget. So for example, our budget limits us to a 6650 XT. Just make it work. Play it with a 1440p monitor, 1080p monitor, it'll be just fine. But again, just consider the resolution of your monitor if you have the budget. All right, what you don't want to happen is you would have a very nice video card, maybe an RTX 3060 Ti, and you're only using a 1080p monitor. You could have bought a 6600 6650 XT and buy a 1440p monitor and use software to make the quality better. That would have been a better option. For a 3060 Ti, a 1440 monitor would be a really good option. All right. And in regards to video cards and CPU, um, a good indicator is this one here, because you may be concerned on, let's say you'd be buying a 2060 RTX 2060 video card, and you're concerned in regards to its future proofing. You could actually Google or go to Steam Hardware survey and check for what users are using the most. So in regards to 2060 Supers or 2060, the regular one, okay, it's all spread out. It's all spread out. It's actually too thin already. But what I'm trying to say here is, as long as a lower tier card, let's search for a 1050 Ti. All right. So just try and imagine a 1050 Ti, 5% of 4.9% of the overall users, no, is still working with a 1050 Ti. And it will not make sense if game developers suddenly decide to design a game that will only run for RTX 3080. Wouldn't make much sense. No one will buy that game. No one will upgrade their GPU from a 1050 Ti straight to an RTX 3080. You know what I mean? So as long as the survey says that some users, or there are still a lot of users using a lower tier video card, you'd still be safe, man. Especially for a budget. Game developers, software developers, OS, Windows, they cannot simply disregard budget computers, because that's where the money's at, man. So if you're concerned and you just want to buy a high tier video card just for the sake of future proofing your computer, that's not how it works, basically. Same goes for CPU, which will be our next topic, and which is also the reason why we decided to buy an i3-12100 CPU with an integrated GPU, for reasons like it'll make life easier in regards to troubleshooting. And in my brother-in-law's case, he's actually putting off buying a video card. So he's actually going to use the integrated graphics card for the moment. And motherboard. Oh, one thing to note, I forget to mention, in regards to CPU, if you guys could check here, if you're wondering what type of CPU you'd be buying, if you'd notice here, there's still a lot of users who are using 4-core CPU. So again, it won't really make much sense for game developers to design a game which doesn't cater to these people. That's not how they make money. They can't just ignore this statistic here. All right, so that's actually one part or one consideration we did on why we chose a 12100 CPU. All right, motherboard. So this is the motherboard that we'd be buying. It's a B660 DS3H from Gigabyte. I have a really good experience with Gigabyte, and although it was the H series, I forget the model though. And this has 2, 4, 5 USB port A, Type A port, and a USB Type C port. Basically, the reason we chose this one here is for the USB layout. That's the first one here. And the motherboard's feature set in particular. Let me open this one here. There you go. In this motherboard here, I really like the number of PCIe ports available because I'm actually going to buy a similar board myself for my network attached storage. And this one here on the second port, the second to the last one, that one there, it's actually, there may be times that that port may actually become unusable, but it's there if you need it, if you could use it. Reason for that is the video card, well, the more recent ones anyway, most probably will eat this space up, making you unable to use this port there. But having an extra one on the most bottom one is really important for us because the USB ports here is quite limited. Me personally, I have 8 or 9 ports in my motherboard right now, and all of them are used up. And I actually have to install an additional add-in card for the USB ports, just so that I could install my Elgato game capture card or game capture device. That's basically it. And my joystick as well is running off that PCIe port or PCIe card, USB port, additional USB ports. So having an extra PCIe slot is actually important. And yeah, other than that, this doesn't come with a Wi-Fi because the one with a Wi-Fi has, you'd have to add 1,000 pesos for that. And we decided to just buy a cheap 200 peso USB Wi-Fi dongle. And I think that's a better option. Well, depending on your situation, your situation may vary. You may opt for built-in Wi-Fi, which is quite fine. But do take note that they do upgrade quite fast. Most of the Wi-Fi, built-in Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi 6. If you're into those kind of things, we now have Wi-Fi 6E. But then again, who needs that? And me in particular, I particularly like the 2.5 gigabit Ethernet of this board. I use it. I will use it, but you may not have use for that, especially if your internet's what, gigabit or 200 Mbps only. So again, your use case may vary. As for the VRM phase, this board could easily handle an i5, an i7 unlocked CPU, No, not really. Especially, well, you won't be buying a K series, a K variant if you don't know what you're doing, right? And no, it won't be a good pair up. An i5 12400 may be sufficient with this board here. 12600K, not too sure. I haven't looked into it. 12400 won't be a problem anyway. And as for the memories, you'd want to be careful with the memory you'd be installing here. I've put a note here. If you're considering to add modules in the future, excuse me, in the future, you may want to stick to a lower speed, 3200 mega transfers per second or lower. 3600 megatransfers per second is fine, but sometimes XMP doesn't work. Sometimes you'd actually have to enter them manually. So you'd have to be careful there. If you'd be using all four slots, like what we'd be doing, because I have an extra two sticks here. So my brother-in-law bought another two. So we'd be using all four slots, but the speeds we'd be manually setting up the speeds. Be careful. What I'd recommend you doing is maybe get the H610M motherboard if you'd only be using this for gaming and very light, for home use. Something like that where the SATA port functionality, M.2 functionality, and some of the PCIe functionality is somewhat. The problem with H610, one of the slots there may be tied up tied up with a PCIe port. For example, this PCIe NVMe M.2 here, you won't be able to use this PCIe slot if there's an M.2 here, or you won't be able to use this M.2 if there's a PCIe installed in this slot here. Or on a similar note, you won't be able to use this M.2 SATA and use one of these ports here. What I'm trying to say is you'd want to be careful on the feature because, for example, you have 4 SATA ports, 2 M.2s, and 3 slots, PCIe slots. And you're actually hoping that you'd be able to use all of them. But the motherboard's feature doesn't allow you to do one thing or by doing the other, something like that, no? So you'd want to make sure on the feature set, all right? Now, going back in regards to memory, H610 only has 2 DIMM slots, which is very good in my opinion if you're okay with one pair of memory operating in dual channel, because it's very easy to stabilize the system even with a high clock speed, all right? But in this case, it has 4 DIMM slots, so try to limit your speed to 3200, 3600 at the max, all right? So if you'll only be using a single pair or one pair of modules, make sure it's paired and operate them in the position your motherboard recommends you to. Normally, it's on the second slot here, A2 and B2. It has something to do with data reflection or yeah, data reflection. Um, yeah, that's it for the memory. And next is, or rather, that's it for the motherboard. In regards to memory, you're building yourself a gaming computer, you'd want to aim for the highest possible clock speed or that you could afford. Now, what you have to be careful of is if you have if you have considerations of adding more memories, that's when you'd have to limit the speed. All right, that's what I was trying to say. And let's go back to my cart here. Motherboard, did I miss anything? Yeah. VRM faces. Oh, I've already said that. As for the VRM faces, this is plenty enough. We have 6 plus 2 face here, right? 6 plus 2 plus 1 hybrid. I'm not really into that one there. All I know is this will run fine. All right. You could visit Buildzoid's channel if you're into that kind of discussion. Now going back to my cart here, case I've already said that. Now let's look at the price my brother-in-law shelled out. So he bought this one here, and this one here. He actually spent 23,700 pesos. But if he does decide on getting the 6650 XT, it'll become 43,647 pesos. And the last one is the computer case. Originally, as for the computer case, he's actually good for this one here. G Storm, 585 pesos, no? So far, he's totaling 22,587 pesos. And if he decided to change the case to a Nexus, TechWare Nexus, this one here. So that price made it 23,700. And if he decides to get the now, he's still deciding which video card to get. It's maybe this one, 1650 from MSI. It's 35,700 now. Or the 20,001 gigabyte 6650 XT. Both are good options, but he's leaning more towards the 1650. Again, it'll depend on your budget, right? And if you do decide to get the 6650 XT, the price becomes 43,647. Still not a bad price, all things considered. If you want to get a higher spec than this one here, you might want to opt to consider getting a higher rating power supply, all right? Oh, and yeah, I've already said this one here from Tom's Hardware. So that's the build. I hope I'm able to help someone out. I'm actually hoping for this video to be short, a 10-minute rant. It's closer to an hour. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, or anyway, help someone out, right? And as always, oh, good luck to your next build or to your build that you'd be doing. And as always, see you in the next one.